Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and very grateful to be your host today as we talk about a very important topic. But first, I want to welcome you to March. We're in a new month, and believe it or not, we are approaching the 1-year mark of COVID. I can't believe it's been an entire year of all of this insanity. I hope you are doing well wherever you are today, and hopefully your world looks a little bit brighter today than it did a year ago. But speaking of that, this month also marks the 1-year anniversary of the Lead Pods. So we've done this for a year, which is also kind of fun. And for those of you who get the Christian Leader C-Link emails, you may have seen that they had a feature about us this week. And so our thanks to our friends over at the Christian Leader for highlighting us, and thank you so much to you listeners for listening for an entire year. This has been a really fun journey. I'm loving hosting this show, and I hope you're enjoying it as well as we get to talk to some really interesting and helpful people all across the country and around the world, really. So thank you for joining us for this first year of the podcast. Today we've got a really important topic, like I said. It's another topic that we probably don't talk about or think about on a day-to-day basis, at least most of us, but today we're talking about grief. And I'm joined by our guest, Jenny Akina. She's out there in Fresno, who has been very active in her local grief share group. She lost her husband several years ago. Today, she just shares with us her journey of going through grief herself, what that looked like, and how she has kind of turned that around and how she's able to help others go through that process now. And so, again, we don't talk about it very much, especially on Sunday mornings. It's probably not something that's on your sermon topic list every week. But it's something that we all have to face. We all already have probably, and we will lose loved ones, and that's just a hard part of being human. So I'm really glad that we're taking some time to talk about it today. I thought Jenny was super helpful and encouraging and friendly, and you'll find out quickly here that she is originally from New Zealand, so she's got an awesome accent that I could just sit and listen to all day. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to Jenny. So thanks for joining us for this episode. I hope you enjoy it. We're going to take a quick break from our sponsor and then get right to an episode about dealing with our grief with our friend Jenny Akina.
The Christian Leader magazine is your starting place for information and community among our U.S. Mennonite Brethren family. With news stories, features, columns, and bi-weekly email updates, The Christian Leader is your source of connection to our broader USMB family. Subscribe to C-Link, our bi-weekly email newsletter, at www.christianleadermag.com. You can also subscribe to our print magazine online or by contacting your local MB Church office. Christian Leader, connecting and informing our USMB family since 1951.
All right, my friends, well, welcome to another episode with a topic that I'm really excited to talk about. It's kind of a hard topic, but it's an important one that we don't often think about or talk about. And so I'm excited to talk about grief today with my new friend, Jenny Akina. She's joining us from Fresno today. So Jenny, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
You're so welcome. And thank you for being willing to talk about this difficult and uncomfortable topic. I appreciate it.
So Jenny, for people who don't know you, today we're kind of talking with you about your position with Grief Share at your church in North Fresno. Can you just give us a little bit of a background about who you are and what led you to get involved with this ministry?
I just want to say at the beginning that everyone's grief journey is unique, and this is my journey. And I don't want to come across like I know it all. I don't want to come across that I'm judging other people, but everyone has a story, and this is mine. And my story started in New Zealand. And when I was 2 weeks shy of my 20th birthday, a young American dropped into my church. Mm-hmm. And after church that night, we had a coffee time for the young people. I was young then. And I bravely shared that the week before that I'd been to see the musical called Godspell, because it was a very controversial musical at that time. And our church was actually kind of protesting it. But I went to see it, and I shared that night that it had actually really blessed me because it was God's word in a different format. Mm-hmm. And this young American guy, George Akina, came across to talk to me about that afterwards because he'd seen it 7 times, in San Francisco. And so that's where our story began. And he didn't go home. We were married less than 5 months later. and had 2 children in New Zealand. And then in 1980, we came back to the States for a while, had 2 more children, and then moved to Fresno in 1990. Our baby was married in 2012, and about 7-8 months later, not even a year after a normal PSA test, George was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And so, a new journey began. I kind of skipped something. In 94, we found North Fresno Church. And so we've been attending North Fresno Church since the beginning of 94, and had no idea what a Mennonite was or Sweebat, but we've learned to love them both. George loved to sing and perform. He was involved in community theater. And at the time of his diagnosis, he joked that he was playing the old rabbi in Fiddler on the Roof, and he could manage that role okay. And he continued, as well as working. And in his final role as the king in The King and I, March to May 2014, that was his absolute dream role. He got to be celebrated while he still lived. He practiced dying 26 times. And actually, the Christian Leader wrote an article about his journey through that. And on October the 10th, 2014, so about 17 months after his diagnosis, George died in our home. And so that's my story. And yeah, Grief Share was a huge part of that. A friend of mine recommended it to me. It was at her church, and I attended. And it was just a safe place to talk about grief and what I was going through, and feel this is normal. I'm not having a crisis of faith. This is normal. It's so interesting. You get insight, and God talks to you in all different ways. And believe it or not, he spoke to me one night. No, he didn't speak, but Meryl Streep did at the Oscars, where they always give tribute to the people that died the year before. Well, this was 2015. And she said, a single person is missing for you, and the whole world is empty. And it was a quote by a lady called Joan Didion, who is not at all a believer, I'm sure. I don't know, but it's true. That's kind of how you feel. And it was interesting because I went to Grief Share the next day, and I said, I heard this quote, and another lady had heard the same thing. And we both related that that's kind of how it feels. It's just learning a new normal, and it's learning to adapt to that. And if you ask me what grief is like, I would just say there's 2 ways I've thought about it. I don't know if you have children.
I have 2 daughters.
Okay. So you know what it's like before you have a baby, like you have all these theories about how you're going to be this incredible parent. But you realize, but it's 24/7, and it's overwhelming, and it's unpredictable, and it's messy, right?
Yes.
And you're exhausted.
Yes.
You can play. But you still have your baby, but you can take your baby to church on Sunday, and maybe someone can hold your baby for a while, but you bring that baby home again, because basically that baby's yours, and you get to do all the nitty gritty. Yeah. And that's kind of what grief is like. You don't really know what you're in for. I don't think you really understand it until you have that baby in your house. And so that's kind of I don't know if that's helpful to anyone. I just have realized I can't expect people to know what I'm going through. But I thought I knew what people were going through. Yeah. And I thought, she did really good at the funeral. She'll be fine. Talking about another widow. And I just think, but it's 24/7. It's not a list of tasks, and it's not clean cut like stages. It's like Grief Share will say, it's like a tangled mess. That's grief. And you're like, oh. But then you hear from other people and you're encouraged by their experiences. You hear from just normal people like me, and then you hear from experts, who pastors and counselors. But you just hear what it's really like, because the problem is you don't hear what it's really like. Not that you'll ever really know what it's like till you have that baby in your house.
Right.
But you don't hear what it's really like. We don't talk about it. Now, you Mennonites are really good at family history, but I don't think many of you probably have tea, with your great grandmother. I mean, we're all going to die. Everyone's going to die, but we don't talk about it. And I was fortunate. I did have a pastor at the time, Pastor James Bergen, and he did actually talk about grief, not just at funerals. And that was really helpful to me, that he addressed it somewhat, from the pulpit. But can I just share another explanation of what grief is like?
Sure, please do.
My grandfather was in World War I in the trenches. And some of my treasured possessions are postcards that he sent to my dad, who was 5. And they're very cheery, give a hug to your mother. And, I saw some little French children today and they reminded me of you. And they're cheery, they're cheerful, because you don't want to tell other people, especially your loved ones, that you're lonely and you're hurting and you're fearful and there's rats running over your feet, basically, and you might die, And one of those postcards is so poignant to me. He's written at the top, somewhere in France, and crossed it out and put Belgium. And I thought, he didn't even know where he actually was.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of what grief is like. You're not quite sure. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
Grief Share gives you these wonderful things that are helpful, like, what do? You just do the next thing. And I think that's, true. And, we have these sayings like keep calm and carry on. And that's kind of a lot of the way that was a saying from World War II, but that's kind of how people want us to be. Keep calm and carry on. And we're anything, about able to do that at times. So.
That's really, I like both of those analogies a lot. That's really helpful. Before we get too much further, Jenny, could you tell us more about Grief Share? What actually is Grief Share, and walk us through your involvement with it?
Okay, so Grief Share is a non-denominational 13-week video series, and you get a book like this. Mine is falling apart. The person that facilitates it, and but you watch a video, and then afterwards, you'll be asked, is there anything that you'd like to share from that video? You should not be ever pressed to share if you don't want to. But what's helpful is that you just get to hear from other people, and everyone there is there because of their grief. And it's not like you have to make excuses for wanting to talk about it. That's what you're there for. So, and then there's homework to do if you want to, but there's no pressure. But it's so wonderful because it's Bible-based. And I just found it very freeing to know that, wow, this is normal. Other people are going through this. It's just not me. And this is a safe place where I can share. Some people won't share for a long time. Like, I remember one session that I went to, because what I did was I went twice at the beginning, and then the facilitator asked me if I would help. So I helped with 2 more. Then after that, that's when I, started it at North Fresno. But what was I going to say? Oh, so we were in one group, and this lady who had actually taught Sunday school to one of my granddaughters, she was there because her son had died. And it wasn't till like the last session that she shared that he had actually taken his own life. And that's what it's like. But at that point, she felt that she could share that. And Grief Share is good because it's very freeing. It says you just do this, your own way. These are some guidelines, but it's going to be different for everybody. And I found that hugely freeing, non-judgmental, and everybody's different, but always getting back to the Lord.
So I kind of want to spend the rest of our time. We talked a little bit beforehand, Jenny, about we want to talk a little bit to people who maybe are grieving right now, give some advice to them, and then we'll spend some time talking to the people who are listening, who maybe one of their loved ones is going through a grieving process, and some advice to how to be a good friend or family member to people in that situation. So to get started, if anyone is currently in the grieving process, if they've lost someone that they love recently or maybe a long time ago, but they've never really dealt with it, what are some things that you would say to those people listening today?
I would say that grief share is for anybody. We had a lady whose husband was tragically killed 30 years ago come to one of our groups and was able to process through some things. If you say someone's lost someone, I think we normally think, oh, recent, but it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I would just say it's so hard. And this is so hard right now, right? Because of COVID, because I can say, keep going to church, right? But, and if you are a believer but right now that's even difficult. I would just say, stay in the Word and just keep your eyes on Jesus. And I know that sort of sounds like simple, but it's not. We all need those people to stand with us. It's really interesting. I looked at the meaning of that word understand, because I've had people tell me they understand what I'm going through, including my older sister with her husband sitting next to her on the couch when I visited New Zealand. I understand exactly what you're going through. No, I can't even understand what another widow is going through. And that's what Pastor James, I always remember him saying that to me, don't let anyone tell you how to do this, Jenny, not even another widow, because we're all different and our relationship with that loved one is unique. If I am talking to someone who's lost a child, there is no way. Yeah. But I can be there. And that is, to me, the gift of presence and being with a person. Understand actually means to stand within. That's the root. To stand among you. You don't have to even say anything. One of the most significant things for me was when I went to church after George died, and someone just came up and put their hand on my arm and just stood there. And it was like they didn't have to say anything. And I think sometimes we feel like we should, right? Because we want to do something.
Right.
But what can you say? Your world is being turned upside down. What can you say to make it better? You can't kiss and, you can't kiss the boo-boo. It's you've got to, you need to heal from that. And it's not, superficial. It's a deep wound. And sometimes people can say things that irritate it. But, I'm kind of learning as I've gone along. I've done that. And I'd still rather people say something, even if maybe it's not that helpful. Than avoid me, because I've had that happen. And I've seen people trained in seminary avoid me. And so it's the gift of presence. As Mennonites, we love to do things like, I'm kind of an official Mennonite now. We love to make, we have a casserole for every catastrophe and pie for every pain, right?
Yeah, I like that.
And that's all good. That is really good. I am not saying that's not good, but just being and not having to say anything but listening. And I'm realizing that, listening is huge, and just hearing the story. And I love to talk about George. People think that you don't want to. I would suggest, if you have a friend that's grieving, to just try to say something, that a special memory that you have of that friend, or something that makes them know you haven't forgotten them, that, their life is still giving.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny example of that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So it's funny how you get your, you just get blessed. But there was this teacher that taught my kids in middle school. I saw her one day about a year after George died. I was out for breakfast with my daughter, and she came over to the table and she said, Jenny, I have to tell you something about George. And I'm like, okay. I had no idea what she was going to say. She said, do you remember that time you had a PTA potluck at the school for the parents and teachers? I'm like, yeah. I had no idea what was coming. She said, well, George cornered me that night. He came up and he said, Mrs. Kamamoto, I want you to come to my church. And she said, I started like scrambling. I'm like, George, I'm a devout Buddhist and I'm not ready to change my religion. And he says, oh, that's okay. I just want you to bring that really good Chinese chicken salad to my church potluck.
Awesome.
That was so George. And if she hadn't shared that, I wouldn't know that story.
Right.
And people don't realize how precious that is. I have shared that with so many friends and I've laughed about it so many times and I've cried, but I love it.
Yeah.
And so that's a gift you can have is don't avoid. And it's the gal that facilitated grief share from me the first time said, people think they don't want you to cry, but they don't want to make you cry. But what they don't realize is you're crying on the inside anyhow. And it's okay. And tears are okay.
Yeah.
I had a widow friend that said she would not go to church because she felt uncomfortable crying. And I was kind of a bit of a rebel. And I was like, you know what, if I can't cry in church, that's really sad. Yeah. And so I went and cried a lot. And I really believe God, he says he measures our tears, he collects them in a bottle. And I think I've got these big, water jugs somewhere stored up in heaven. But it's okay. Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the main things I wanted to hear you talk about, which you're doing a great job explaining already. But I think for a lot of us, if we haven't lost a spouse or a child, everyone's probably lost someone, but for one of those really, really deep relationships, I think for people, like I'll put myself in that category. We want to be helpful. We want to be there. We want to care. We want you to know that we care. But I think a pretty common thing is we don't want to accidentally say something that's going to be hurtful, right? So I'm curious, is there something like that? Like, has someone done that to you, or they're trying to be helpful but actually hurt? Because I hear you say that it's actually more helpful to probably say what you want to say, and even if it does sting a little bit, or if it brings tears or whatever, it's better to do that than to do nothing. But I think we're just so afraid of accidentally hurting that we maybe don't say anything. So can you just give some advice if people feel that way?
I'll give you some ones at church.
Okay, great.
Okay, 3 weeks after George died, a dear friend, is asking me if I've sold his car yet.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like thinking you kind of want to scream and say, I haven't quite got used to him not being
right
in the house and in my bed.
Right.
I thought about his car, but you don't say that. So you kind of smile and say no. So in a way, what we do is we perpetuate that it's okay. And that grief is maybe a list of tasks to do.
Yeah.
And it's not. But I think the hardest one for me, and bless her heart, she's the sweetest lady. We were having a church luncheon and I was sitting at a table with some other widows, because that's where you sit often now, sit with the widows.
Yep. And
she came over and she said, I think I'm kind of starting to understand what it's like. My husband's been gone on a business trip for 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
And we just sat and we smiled because she's very caring. And see, I am not judging these people because I could well have said those things until I knew.
Right.
But that's kind of thing that you hear, because people, it just shows you they have no idea. Unfortunately, they probably will get an idea one day.
So it sounds like the most hurtful things is, of course, downplaying it would always be wrong. But if I'm hearing you right, anything that makes it sound like they are in this, like they're equal to you in your grief, is that kind of the most hurtful thing?
Yeah, but also like giving the scriptures that.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so like we know that all things work together for good to them, those that love God. And, it's interesting in Job is the one that says, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It's not his friends. And I think it's okay for us to say these things, the grieving person.
Yeah.
But it's like I read something about Johnny Erickson Tada. She talked about when she was in the hospital and had lost, she became a quadriplegic from that diving accident as a teenager. And some people came in and gave her verses, And she said at that time, it almost felt like I was being scolded. She recalled a time when she had fallen off her bike as a youngster and she was doing something she shouldn't have done, or she was going too fast, and her dad just picked her up and hugged her. He didn't scold her and say, you should have known better, or you didn't. And I think that people, we know all those things, but we just are trying to figure it out for ourselves. But that's really not for you to. It almost makes us feel guilty. It's kind of like when my mum said, and my baby wouldn't sleep. That said, you feed the baby and you put the baby down for 4 hours, and it would, it didn't work that way for me. And
Right.
I remember my mum saying, "What is wrong with that child?" But really what she's saying is, "What's wrong with you?" But
Right.
that's kind of, you almost feel like this, that people have expectations. And I think life is about learning and having expectations and realizing what's not quite the way we thought it was going to be. But sometimes people that haven't been there, they don't mean to, but
Right.
it's hard.
I heard you say earlier that sometimes just silence, just being there with people
Yeah.
is maybe the most helpful thing, because like you said, all those people who said those hurtful things to you, their hearts, I'm guessing, were pure, very pure. They're trying to be a good friend. They're just trying to have conversation. They're stumbling because they don't know what else to say. So,
Right. What
so
can
maybe,
you say? Yeah.
yeah. So is maybe a pretty safe bet to just talk about the person, like you said, share memories or share what they meant to you. Is talking about the person who died, is that maybe one of the safest things to do?
For me, it is, but maybe for someone that's hard at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, the thing is, like, now I can talk about George,
Sure.
but if I had lost a baby
Mm-hmm.
the day after
Yeah.
I'd given birth, like a young gal in the church did a few years ago, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
what can you say? But I think just being there and kind of taking your cues from the person and just trying something and keeping people in prayer. I remember my friend Grace telling me that one of the most special things was when she lost her husband, and she's got a good last name, she's a good Mennonite lady, Grace Wayne. She's a dear friend. She said some older gentleman from church whose like dad had been her pastor when she grew up said, "I woke up one night and I just thought I needed to pray for you, Grace." And she said, that's like the most precious thing, we don't know what to say, but we can bring these feelings to God. And that's that verse in the Bible, we don't know what to do, Lord, but our eyes are on you.
Yeah.
And so I just think, but I think we just feel like we have to do something. Like sometimes it's just being.
I'm curious if you can take, especially in the early days, were you able to articulate, did you know what you needed and wanted? Because I think another temptation for some of us might be to ask, like, what do you need? But I imagine you maybe don't know what you need, and maybe people have trouble asking for help. So what was that something that you wrestled with?
Are you talking about physical things?
Yeah, or maybe did you know that you didn't want people to ask about his car? Again, people, you probably didn't even necessarily know what would trigger you, what wouldn't, right?
No, you don't. You don't.
Right.
You're kind of winging it as you go along, right? Like
Sure,
you are
right.
sometimes with a baby, right?
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
And you're trying to survive, right?
Yes.
And yes, on little sleep. And that's like grief. You're not sleeping very well, maybe. Grief share was just so helpful because it explained a lot of these things. But,
Okay.
They'll say, like, you need to actually maybe ask. I found it hard. I still find it hard asking. I found it hard asking. Some people are better at asking, but, people do say things like, let me know what you need. Well,
Yeah,
really, it's better for them to say, I'm going to bring something by for dinner on Thursday night. Or one of the sweetest things was this couple that have been friends for years, and they've just included me when they go to, like, when we all went to, concerts.
Yeah, sure.
And they've just included me, and I always go with them. And they don't they're Christians, but they don't go to my church. But it was just like so wonderful to be included. Oh, we're going to go to the Philharmonic, and I'm just kind of I just go with them. And so because all those normal things that we got to do, not that George actually went to the Philharmonic, but he was always in for a good musical. And, we just don't have that anymore.
I think what's so hard is, like you've said several times already, that everyone handles this so differently, right? And so what might be helpful to one person, if someone said the same thing to the other person, might actually be very hurtful. So again, from my end of things, it's hard to know, because for people that we really care about, we love and want to help, it's just such a tricky tightrope. And I think that's why so many people are quiet. So I guess it really comes down to knowing the person really well. Is that part of it too? Maybe the people that you're closest to, you can maybe have more of an impact with than if it's just someone that you have a kind of a fringe relationship with?
But I think it's also taking a risk. Like that lady, Mrs. Kamamoto, that shared that story about George, I hadn't not seen her for years. That happened probably about 94, 95, probably just after we'd come to North Fresno. I mean, they happened a long time ago. And so I think it's maybe people just taking a little bit of a risk, but I think more talk about the person and about the person that's grieving rather than talk about you, because a lot of people want to tell you their story and kind of make you feel better, but really they say the worst grief is your own. You don't want to really hear anyone else's.
Sure. So one more question. I'm just curious, just because I haven't walked through this, I'd like for you to maybe give some advice to those of us who are maybe trying to be good friends. Another phrase that I'm guessing might be kind of harmful is moving on, quote unquote, moving on. And especially if people, like if someone loses a spouse and they choose to get remarried, or they lose a child and have another child, like I'm sure that language of moving on might be harmful, because you never completely get over it, right? But you do eventually continue to live.
Right.
Can you, for those of us who haven't been in your shoes, can you just walk us through what that's been like in your life? And again, maybe some things we should and shouldn't do around the idea of kind of the next chapter?
I just think don't put any expectations or timeline on it. I've actually had friends that have been told you should be over this by now, and sometimes there's just no rhyme or reason with grief. And they say joy and sorrow coexist, and I really believe that. Like I had two grandchildren. We had two grandchildren before George died, and now I have 4 more. So he doesn't know those children, and every time, there's often things that happen. Man, I wish George could see that. So it's like, that's what life is. And I don't really like that phrase moving on, because I think people get the idea that something finishes, but you actually bring, like George is part of our lives still. In fact, I wrote this on a napkin this morning. My 5-year-old granddaughter lives with me, and she said to me this morning at breakfast, "Are you going to die soon? Dying is not fun. It makes my tummy hurt." Well, you will get to see Grandpa. I miss Grandpa. She talks about him a lot. And then in the next minute, she is singing Incy Wincy Spider.
Yep.
And that's kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
So one minute you're like, oh, and then the next minute she's lustily singing Incy Wincy Spider. And I thought, yeah, up the water spout, you feel like a water spout yourself. But, that's what it's kind of just, I just would say to pastors to not be afraid to use illustrations about grief in your sermons and dying and normalize it.
Yeah.
Because I think I was fortunate. I don't think a lot of people hear about it from, on a Sunday. And this is as common. Like I've thought to myself, the graveyard is as common as the backyard and the schoolyard, but we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to put up those fake ones on Halloween like my neighbor does.
Mm-hmm.
That's acceptable, right?
Right.
To talk about it, people almost think you're being morbid.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've done is we've moved even cemeteries, to the outskirts, west of the highway, way
Right.
up there. And, in the old days, there was something about those tombstones being in the churchyard, because that's what it was before
Right.
they had graveyards, right?
Yep.
The rich people could actually be buried in the church, but the poor people were outside. But you saw those as you walked into church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so many kind of pictures of grief that people have and what that's like. And I remember visiting an old church in England,
Mm-hmm.
and I was walking up, between those tombstones, and I looked down at this tombstone and it caught my eye, and I couldn't believe it, because it was like from the 1880s, 1875. And someone had written on there they'd lost a child in 1865 and then a second child in 1875. And underneath that, the names of the parents, and it said, "We are yet in life, yet we are in death." And that had kind of been like, I don't know if someone tried to remove it after that, because it was kind of faint. And when I took a picture of it, it didn't even show up on my camera, but I remembered it, because I'm like, that's a cry of grief. Because usually they put things, like "Forever with Jesus," or, something that, but I was like, well, that was real.
Mm-hmm.
And expressions of grief is everywhere. And I just think, like, you could, even if you're not comfortable sharing a personal story, you could share. There's so many stories out there, and you can listen and hear stories. But I just think it needs to be talked about more, so that when we're in it, we don't feel so confused and alone. And if it wasn't for Grief Share, honestly, I don't know. I think it would have been completely different for me, because it was just so refreshing to be able to actually talk about it. No quick fix, but we know that. Like, it's interesting, there's an acronym for HOPE, and it was actually written by a teenager who was going through grief, and the acronym is "Hold On, Pain Ends."
Oh,
And in
wow.
a way, that's true. I mean, it may not completely end, but it gets, it does. You get further along on that journey. I think people just need to be comfortable with seeing that it's hard, because I don't want people to feel guilty that I should be doing this. They say, take that "should" out of your vocabulary.
That's good. Jenny, you've been really, really helpful. So thank you for sharing with us. Our time's getting close to wrapping up here.
Okay.
I want to give you a chance. Is there anything else you want to say? Or I know you're a big believer in Grief Share. So if people want to learn more, anything else you want to share with us, and then how can we learn more if we're interested in either ourselves getting involved or any other resources that might be helpful for us?
Well, everyone's going to know people that are grieving. And I think particularly during COVID, this has become maybe more of a topic that people can relate to. We had a gal in our Grief Share group who wasn't even a believer and still isn't, but she came and she kind of, she was a little skeptical about some of the stuff, but I know she came because she felt loved on. Yeah. And I think what an opportunity for the church at this time to provide something, because if you said to a neighbor or a friend, we have a grief support group, I'll tell you how Lori, this person I'm talking about, got to come. She was a co-worker of a woman in church. They both teach at a community college, and this gal from church took her food, and the lady's son that took food said, "Oh, Mum, you should tell so-and-so about this grief support group we have at church. We'd actually talked about it the Sunday before." She came, and it's like, that's the way it should be. It was kind of just that normal, like, it shouldn't be a big, we're having that Grief Share group. It should just be, this is what we do. Yeah. I think we just need to be aware, and we need to stand with, people going through it and learn and listen. Can I just read this quote from Peter Marshall? He was a Scottish pastor, but then he went on to be like minister to the Senate or something, chaplain to the Senate. I didn't know that in this country. Okay. But he said, I used to write it on cards for people before I really knew, but it's still good. Okay. Those we love are with the Lord, and the Lord has promised to be with us. If they are with him and he is with us, they cannot be far away. And I just think it's just comforting to know that, they're okay, Mm-hmm. I'm not grieving for it. I know George is fine.
Right.
We're learning to live without that person in our life, and the Lord is the one who really does understand. And so.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to think of it. I like that a lot.
And George had this great saying. Well, actually, it's one of those sayings. It's not even a scripture. Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's learning to dance in the rain. And I think that that's what we do the best we can, and we take one step at a time, and just knowing that God is with us, and he sends things our way and to bless us and encourage us. And I just hope that something I've said has been an encouragement for someone, because I'm still learning.
I'm confident. I mean, you encouraged me, and I'm not really walking through that right now. So I'm sure, at least I hope and pray that people have been encouraged, because I think you shared a lot of really helpful things. So thank you for that. I want to make sure we say real quick, I think you said before we started that the Grief Share has a website where you can type in your zip code and find a group. Is that right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. If you go to griefshare.org, they have a website, and it will tell you. And just, I know it's different right now. My sister-in-law had to do it on Zoom, but still, that is still, a resource out there. Yeah. And but go to that website, and it will give you directions from there. But even in your local, if you still get the newspaper, there might be something. That's where they advertise the Grief Share group, that I went to.
All right. Well, Jenny, like I said, this has been awesome. Thank you again for being vulnerable to share your story with us. And I'm grateful for the great work you're doing, because this is important and people need help, and you've been helpful to educate us today. So thank you very much for spending some time with us. It's been great.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Well, once again, many thanks to Jenny for joining us today. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you did as well. Jenny's the kind of person, I don't know if you felt this way as we were listening, but I just feel like we could have talked for hours and hours and hours, and she was just very encouraging and comforting, and just had a lot of really helpful things for me to listen to. So I hope you enjoyed it as well. And if you know me at all, you know that I'm a huge fan of Marvel movies. I love Spider-Man, Captain America, all that stuff. I could geek out and talk about that for hours. But, I'm watching the news. There's a new series on Disney Plus called WandaVision. If you're in the superhero world at all, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's a really great TV show from Marvel. But I was just watching it last week, and in the most recent episode, there's a quote that I just couldn't, it was just perfect timing from this episode. So one of the main characters in that show said, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And to me, I just love that quote. I thought it fit perfectly with what Jenny talked about today. What is grief if not love persevering? So that really hit home for me, and it just reminded me of this conversation. And again, as Jenny said, this is an important thing that we don't usually talk about. And so I hope this conversation today might be helpful for you, your family, and your churches to help those in need who might need just someone to listen and care for them, like Jenny talked about today. So thank you so much for joining us for another episode, and I am already looking forward to next week. So have a great rest of your week, and we will look forward to seeing you next time right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.